Welcome to episode 496 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I am interviewing Kurt Weiser. I have him back on the podcast from episode 135. In that episode, he talked about his feature film Cam Girl and how he got his start in the business. He's back this week to talk about his latest project, A Voice in Violet, which is a dramatic podcast he wrote and directed and also edited. He and his team put together a great cast for this project, which includes Bronson Pinchot from the 80s sitcom Perfect Strangers. He's got some great tips on how this new medium works and how writers can get involved, so stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 496. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and career letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Just a few quick words about what I'm working on. The contest closed for entries, and I've been working on that, getting the scripts sent out to all the readers, getting them evaluated, getting them pushed out to the industry judges. And of course, I'm starting to organize the film festival in October. If you did enter the film festival, we're going to announce all the selected films by September 1st, which will hopefully give everyone plenty of time to make travel plans. Ideally, we'd really love to see all the filmmakers come and celebrate their films with us. And then we'll, of course, be announcing the screenplay contest second round in early September as well. And then the actual film festival, as I said, it's in October. It runs for that weekend, October 6th to October 8th. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm still trying to get through my rewrite on my rom-com, but that's proving fairly difficult at the moment, just with everything else I have going on. So I've been really kind of struggling with that, but hopefully as things open up a little bit for me here with the contest and the festival, some of the other things I'm working on, I can get some more time for that. Anyways, those are the things that I've been working on. Now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Kurt Weiser. Here is the interview. Welcome, Kurt, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show again today.
Returning champion, second time guest. It's a thrill to be here.
Perfect. I do appreciate it. So I'm going to direct people back to the first episode you were on. It's episode number 135, where you came on the SYS podcast. We talked about your background in Florida and your feature film Cam Girl. So I encourage people to go check that out. But today you're on to talk about your new dramatic podcast series, which you wrote and directed, called A Voice in Violet. So let's dig into that project a little bit. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or log line. What is the pitch or log line for A Voice in Violet?
So A Voice in Violet is an audio narrative fiction audio series, and it follows Violet, who is a lounge singer in a Hollywood club who lives a murderous double life when the people who have wronged her come to visit her from her past.
Okay. And so where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of this story?
To be honest, the origin of it was in the middle of the pandemic, 2021. I decided I would just produce my own web series. So it's a really different project called Leave Quietly. And it was kind of inspired by a series called Calls. And it has visuals that Calls does and Leave Quietly will too, but it's very audio driven, dialogue driven. I was like, I could produce something like this, and that could be my first SAG project, first official SAG project with SAG actors. So I went into that and produced that. The people among the great cast that I cast in that was Brooke Lewis-Bellis. She enjoyed working with me on that project and liked my writing, and she's a producer herself. So she, almost shortly after production of that wrapped, she approached me to if I'd be interested in writing, directing, editing an audio series. And it was pitched as kind of a starring vehicle for her. And those were kind of the parameters. Like initially, and then I asked, kind of what kind of parts would you be interested in? And one of the things she told me that really clicked is she wanted it to be a Norman Desmond type character. And that was like, oh, okay, I've got it then.
Mm-hmm.
So I can do like a kind of dark film noir, starlet. And then I gave her several pitches, and one of them was A Voice in Violet, and I'm so glad that she picked that one out of the bunch because it just felt so right to be told in this medium, to be told as an audio drama.
Gotcha. So just give me a little bit of background. Like where did you even get the idea that this, a fictional podcast was even a thing? Was this something you were listening to? Had you listened to some other and you thought this was a good medium? What was sort of that? And again, as someone who comes more from, the audio and visual background, how do you see this fitting into your own career? Like, why go down this alley? What was sort of enticing to you to do just an audio series?
It's a great question. In truth, I listen a long time listener of podcasts, but nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
Before this, all nonfiction I'd listened to. I was certainly aware of fiction podcasting, and audio series, but I didn't really listen to them in earnest, until this project came my way, and I dove in head first when that happened. And then in doing so, it just confirmed, oh, this is a very interesting medium. It's worth noting that I did like all my audio posts on like the feature. So I worked very heavily in Foley effects prior to that. And that certainly helped leverage, all the confidence I had into writing, directing, editing, and doing the Foley for a feature length audio series. So that's pretty much how it led. I didn't until I got the gig, but then really hit research and listened to as many of these things as I could, and some great ones.
Yeah. And one of the things that just always occurred to me when I started to hear about this, fictional dramatic podcast series, it's, you just mentioned a web series. Like even a simple web series is quite difficult to produce because you've got cameras and lighting and sets and this sort of stuff. So just the frugal, practical side of myself, this seems like a great medium for writers because it's so much easier and cheaper to just get to ship a product out to the public. Did that play into any of your sort of thinking here? Is that there is some practical elements that can help you just create stuff?
It definitely played into it, I'm sure. I mean, I can't speak for Brooke Lewis Bellis's decision was to produce the audio series, but I do know just in general, a big reason why it was exploded, this medium exploded, like especially during the pandemic, is for that very reason. I mean, we've got A-list actors. Demi Moore starred in one called Dirty Diana. Lawrence Fishburne has starred in one. Rami Malek. Brad Pitt's about to. I mean, it is actually insane what's going on. And I have to believe a big part of it is because of the ease of production, because at that time, of course, it was much easier for social distancing concerns, when they were at their peak during the pandemic, to produce something, as an audio series. And then as far as the medium, I think it was in great challenges, but at the same time, I embraced them. I think this is such, it felt like an opportunity to tell a story from beginning to end in this medium, in this new way. It's kind of funny because I'm such a visual person, in my storytelling and everything, and in life, I don't know street signs when I drive. It's all landmarks and stuff. But so it was just very interesting to try to tell something in that medium. For instance, we all know the adage, show don't tell, right? When you're writing screenplays, I quickly learned for this, it's hear don't tell. So, I mean, we can explore that if you want. Because you don't have, the luxury, or in this case, a crutch of visuals. So it's like, how can you convey exposition and plot points
Yeah, yeah. And let's get into that in a second. Just a couple quick questions on some of what you're saying there. You were about to mention some of these series. So maybe for our audience, you can just tell us, like, what were some of these series that you think are really good that if someone wants to get into this, you can recommend? Yeah, go check out this. You mentioned one with, I think, Demi Moore, you just said. But maybe you can just rattle off a couple of these series our audience can find them and listen to them.
Absolutely. Just to name a few. And again, this is trying to like get a different range of different stories,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many different, you can tell any type of story in this medium, just like with film. Impact Winner. There's another one called Mother Hacker. There's really important to note, very current, is The Horror of Dolores Roach, because that's an amazing fiction podcast that is now released. It was adapted into a streaming series that's on Amazon,
Huh.
and it was produced by Blumhouse, the adaptation. So I recommend both. Check out the podcast and the streaming series of that. American Hostage was amazing, I felt, and that was inspired by true events. That's like based on a true story. How to Win Friends and Disappear People. Listening In, The White Vault, Hot House Bruiser, which I thought was interesting because it's a film. That one's a film noir, and it uses like the narrative, like an old film noir detective, but it's also like a sci-fi twist to that one, Hot House Bruiser. And then also Unwanted. Unwanted was very unique because it's like a buddy comedy action series, but all told through audio.
Now, I just growing up, we always heard about there was this moment in time in the 20th century before television was invented, after radio, where these radio shows, and I think my dad listened to these and they would talk about, Flash Gordon and the Hardy Boys, the real classic, sort of shows. And I would hear about these things. I don't know that I ever actually heard one, but did you look into any of those? Because it seems to me that would be pretty fertile ground. These were people that were creating audio, fictional audio stories.
Well, since you bring that up, then for sure the one I did listen to before this was War of the Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Famously, the Orson Welles,
yeah,
did the one that actually caused the panic in the streets because people thought aliens were actually invading. So I mean, that was a different time, clearly than now. But I mean, that does tell you the power of the medium, that people believe that was really happening.
Yeah. So let's dig into your writing process a little bit, specifically on this. So you did 6 episodes for this series. How long is each episode? And then really what I'm getting at, like, how much writing is there for something like this? How many pages? How does it actually break down? Is it in a screenplay?
All right, I'll give the answer for this particular project and then in general. For this, for A Voice in Violet, the total runtime approximately of each episode is like 13 minutes, give or take a minute, here or there. And then it can range in general, like, I mean, it could be 40 minutes per episode, and it can have, 12-part season, instead of 13
times. So the 13 times 6, you're approaching like a feature film, like a whatever 70, correct, whatever the math is on that, 80 minutes or something. So it's just about a feature film that's broken up into 6 episodes. Was that sort of how you describe it?
Exactly. Yeah, I came in at like 78 minutes.
Okay.
And change.
And then how are scripts laid out? Do you use Final Draft? You type them just normally like a normal screenplay would be, or just how did you actually write these, create these, and type these out and get them ready for production?
Good question. That was actually one of the first, things I was like, wait a minute, how do you, write one of these? And the current answer that we can give your listeners is, and I can thank Brooke Lewis Bellis. She sent me an article that showed examples of the different formats, because the answer is currently there's not, like, that's how new this is. Like, it's not like a screenplay where if you submit a screenplay to somebody in a totally different format, they'll be like, what is this? With this, you can do various different formats. You can do like a play script style format. You can format it like a screenplay. That's perfectly acceptable. Or you can do kind of like another example I saw was a very bare bones one, where it's all just like left justified and like very, very limited formatting changes. And so, I mean, what we went with, I believe it was closer to the play script format. So that's what was submitted. I mean, and that's
so once you're in the screenplay, typing it out, like how is it laid out with description? And I mean, is there a narrator? I mean, there wouldn't be like in a typical screenplay, the description is what you're seeing on the screen. I guess you might have some description, like, there's a gunshot off screen or something like that. But is there description that goes along this? Is there a narrator that sort of gives the audience, clues the audience into some of these visual things that are not necessarily captured with the audio?
Well, for the narrator question, that depends on, the writer and production team, what they decide. I've heard plenty that take both, some that have a narrator and others that don't, that feel more like you're just listening to a movie in that sense. That answers that one. And then as far as action lines, the way those are usually approached that I saw and the way we did it on this project is they're audio descriptions. So you have action lines the same way you would, like in a screenplay, but you're describing what you hear. You try to think about it from the sense of the soundscape of the story you're telling.
So just any tips for writing using audio, and just, I mean, I'm asking, like, how do you differentiate when a scene ends? Is there some sound cue? And then how do you establish, if you're not using a narrator, how do you establish location? I mean, I guess you could, for a beach scene, you could have waves and birds and stuff, but like, what does that actually look like on the page when you're writing this? How do you denote the end of a scene? How do you denote the location without a narrator?
That very much comes into the soundscape, and it might not necessarily be something you write, at the top, below the. That's the other thing. The action lines, the snug lines, are very, very brief. So because obviously you don't need interior, exterior, night, day, because we're not seeing any of it. So you don't need those kind of like classic filmmaking production needs. So it'll just say the driftwood. Like a lot of our stuff was set at the Hollywood Club, the driftwood. So it just says the driftwood, and then below that it might describe, before so and so walks in while they're getting ready for the night's business, so before they're open. So or the bustling of all the patrons inside the driftwood, are heard as so and so walks in. So I mean, so it comes from that. It basically is done a lot of times in post, in editing.
Gotcha.
But that's very important, is also try to make sure either it's through dialogue, that it's clear where you are. Like, don't take it for granted that, the audio will tell for sure where they are. You don't want people to get lost with location or point of view, anything like that.
Gotcha. So as we were chatting before the interview, you mentioned that a lot of this story revolves around a lounge singer, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit. But one thing that just occurs to me is, you have an audio story. So having a story that, has singing and music and that sort of stuff seems well suited. Was that part of your strategy? And maybe you can speak to that a little bit, just working with that music team and incorporating that stuff into the story.
Absolutely. That was one of the main things that made this project feel unique. Because like I said, I've recently listened to a lot of these, and I haven't heard one that takes this approach, telling the story of a lounge singer that lives like a double life that's intriguing and thrilling, and mysterious. So that definitely played into it. And the music, because of that, the music was crucial. Like, I think it's always important, but it was like especially crucial because, I mean, it'd be like having a boxing movie without very good boxing in it, So I'd have to thank our composer, who is Michael Trapp, and our singer, and who also provided music, original music for it. Is her original music is Fawn, is her artist name. So like Fawn's music became like When Violet's Singing on Stage. So, because that was very important, that we needed to show that side of it, because that's her life, and it also reflects her goals and her passion and everything. So that had to be represented in this.
Gotcha. Is your producer slash actress who you're working with on this? Did she come to you saying I can sing? Was that part of it? That was part of her skill set, or no? You're using the other songs that people had.
That actually wasn't discussed initially, but it is kind of a fun fact that she does sing, and we actually used a song that she sings, just kind of like as it's like something that's played in the scene, like on somebody's cell phone, which is "Get Me Off of Your Mind." So she's actually the singer. Brooke Lewis Bellis is the singer in that one. But that wasn't discussed beforehand.
Oh, gotcha. Huh.
But it was decided during production and confirmed in post that we were going to do it this way. We do want to portray Violet singing on stage, and we can do it through using Fawn's incredible music.
So this next question, again, I'm just trying to is there anything, are there any things that I should be asking you and I'm not, since not something I've really done in terms of writing a fictional podcast, but were there some things going into this that you thought were going to be really easy, but they turned out to be hard? And then the opposite question is, were there some things you thought were going to be hard that turned out to be easy? And I'm just sort of, I'd like, now that you've been through this process, you have some experience, and for the rest of us that don't, maybe there's sort of some things you can warn us about, things that you went in there thinking, oh, this is going to be easy, but that just didn't turn out to be quite as easy as you thought. And then the opposite, where there's some things that maybe you could have leaned on a little harder, but you didn't because you thought they were going to be difficult.
Like I knew from the beginning that a challenge is to, just like on screen, so much of it comes to the actors. So much of it falls on the actors. It has to be believable, right? So in a lot of these, the ones that really stand out, a lot of audio series that are incredible, you really feel like you're there, and that's the other thing. It's kind of immersive and uses your creativity because you don't have the visuals. So if it ever feels like it's just an actor performing in a booth, then you lose all that. And it kind of just sticks out like a sore thumb because you don't have the visuals. People aren't distracted by an explosion or set pieces or, So that was very crucial early on. I made sure, okay, how can I, as the director and writer of this, make sure that it doesn't ever feel like that? Thankfully we had an amazing cast. So it starts with that, but how can we help make sure that it feels genuine? And one of the things I did is, when we had a locked screenplay for this, I went through and found ways that the sound design, the sound effects, could interact with the dialogue. For instance, there's a scene where Violet hugs another character. And I was like, okay, the last little bit where she's saying this dialogue, that can be mid-embrace. So of course, when you do that, it constricts your chest, and changes the tenor of your voice. So the actors did an incredible job embracing that kind of direction. And I really think knowing that from the beginning, and earmarking parts of the script that would do that, goes a long way. And then as far as what turned out to be easy was and it was like the Foley effects, because that's so important, but I actually love it. Like I found a new passion for it, like more than ever before. I used some of the library I already had for previous work, but I recorded so much also originally for this series, and that felt so easy and wonderful. But I thought it might have been a challenge.
Yeah.
Like, make these feel really great, you need a really dynamic soundscape.
Gotcha. So you mentioned the cast and the great actors you have. Maybe we can touch about that a little bit. How did you assemble this cast of actors? You have Bronson Pinchot, who is from Perfect Strangers, the TV show in the 80s. Maybe you can just round that up. How did you bring these actors on board? What is the carrot for them? How do you entice actors that are used to doing, movies or TV shows? How do you entice them to come and do a podcast?
All compliments to the casting go to our producer, Brooke Lewis Bellis.
Okay.
Who also, I believe she worked with a casting director as well. That would be a question for her though.
Gotcha,
But
gotcha.
yeah, it's like I'd have to imagine it first starts with the writing. I'm so grateful that they said yes. She could have
Mhm.
easily, approached them, you know, uh, through her networks, and they, said this isn't for me. So that's the first step, is have a great project that people want to be part of, and then yeah, find different connections. If it's all SAG, then that of course brings you to a different level, um, and you can approach actors of a different caliber, a different level of their career, and having a casting director, I'm sure, can't hurt if you
Mhm.
are able to pursue that way. Also among the cast is Nikki Blonsky, Eric Edabari, Nelson Lee, and Wilson Germain Heredia. I was just so thrilled to work with this incredible cast.
Let's talk about just the technical chops. I mean, obviously you have a background in this, you know, a lot of just technical things in terms of editing and shooting and that stuff. But what would you say are the necessary technical chops that one's need? And then the second part of that is, what is the hardware and software that one needs? But let's just talk about the technical chops. Obviously you have editing skills. That's pretty important for something like this. But what do you need? What would you recommend if there's a writer out there listening to this and they're thinking about going and trying to create this? What do they need to know technically? Maybe they need to find someone that has some technical skills that you have, but maybe they don't have. But what do you see just technically? What do you need in your team?
Okay, so assuming it's going to be more of an indie space,
Mm-hmm.
because it's worth noting that there's major studios that produce this stuff now, like Q Code and Realm and Gimlet. But assuming your listeners, they're gonna do this more independent vibe, you're gonna want to either have somebody immediately in your team, or find somebody who has those kind of resources, like a really top quality microphone. If not, then access to a great sound booth.
Mm-hmm.
A great place that has access to a sound booth, and recording. Uh, you need your recording software. You need a great quality microphone. If you're also doing the Foley yourself, you need a quality field recorder, and quality mic and boom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the bare minimum. You want to start with that.
Yeah, and now you and I are both familiar. In fact, you were in the movie, and part of it, Christmas Staycation, was one that we showed at the film festival last year. And I'm curious, because my recollection on that one was that they actually recorded some of their audio through Zoom. And you would say that's not going to cut it. Just as a professional, editor, sound guy, Foley guy, you would want something higher quality. Someone shouldn't be just recording this on Zoom. The quality is not going to be as high as what you might want.
I wouldn't recommend
Okay.
that. I mean, I'd never deter anybody from doing it that way. I mean,
Yeah.
here's the thing. Is it a project where it's supposed to take place over Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the conceit of the narrative?
Gotcha.
If so, then maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But you can
yeah.
easily in post, as we all know, you can easily in post have full control over making it sound like it's recorded over Zoom, or
Mm-hmm.
use filters that's sounding it from a cell phone speaker, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so can you get kind of specific? Do you have a specific recorder that you could recommend? What editing software do you use? Is there one that's geared more towards editing just audio versus, whatever the Premiere, what's the Black Magic one, DaVinci? These are all, you can do audio in them, but they also are obviously built and very robust for the video element. Was there some software you used?
For the ones I know, I can certain say the truth on this. I don't want to give anything inaccurate. Is I know the Foley. I used a Zoom recorder. I highly recommend that. It's an incredible field recorder. And I used a Rode portable microphone. That's perfect for
Mm-hmm.
for that reasons. For like I believe we had like all the dialogue was a different type of setup, of course. That's like a top quality microphone, like an Audio Technica, a brand like that, is what you'd want to go for dialogue. I highly recommend that. And then for me, I did all the editing, and audio post in the Premiere Suite. I highly
Gotcha.
recommend, but I mean, you can, like you said, it can be whatever you're comfortable with.
Mhm.
I mean, most of these software give you the same kind of capabilities and latitude. So
Perfect. Perfect. So how can people listen to A Voice in Violet? How are you guys going to release it, and how can people find it?
thanks to Philly Chick Pictures and Brooke Lewis Bellis, it is available on all major uh, podcast platforms, so like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible,
Mhm.
you name it. Like it's on all of them, really.
Gotcha. Do you see, and I wonder, just as the writer director, maybe you didn't get into this, but is there any money to be made for these things? Like, how are these things ultimately monetized? If you put a podcast on iTunes, like the Selling Your Screenplay podcast, I'm putting it on there for free, but I'm advertising my services in it. How would one monetize a fictional podcast like this?
I would say there's several different ways that it can be monetized. One way for sure is the model like of the studios, Gimlet and others, like they would try to make stuff that's a proof of concept to get picked up to be made into a streaming series. So that's a amazing way to monetize a property like this. But that's a long shot.
Yeah, yeah, tough.
Another way would be to have a sponsor. Just like how other nonfiction podcasts have advertisements or a
Mhm.
sponsor at the beginning or end. You could do it in a fiction narrative space, but it's not done that frequently, not nearly
Gotcha.
as much as nonfiction. So those are the two main ways that I can think. I mean, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, so yeah,
It's still an evolving field. So maybe there'll be some, and maybe there'll be some that have subscriptions and that sort of stuff.
there is that too. Yeah, there is a subscription model. Yeah, like the big ones, Q Code and them, they also have subscription to their content, but they also release pretty much all of them. They release to the public, a few weeks behind.
Mhm.
So you get early access. The
Gotcha.
subscribers get early access. I'm glad you brought that up. So
Yeah,
that is another way.
gotcha.
So, but eventually all the stuff gets released to the public,
Mhm.
but they sell subscription for early access to it.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. So, what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Obviously, we'll put your IMDb page in the show notes, but Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything you're comfortable sharing, we will round up and put in the show notes.
I'm on some of the socials on Twitter. I'm on camgirl_movie. On Facebook, I'm Kurt.Weiser.5. On Instagram, it's just my name, Kurt Weiser. And I've recently started, because I love this, work in this medium so much and felt like I learned so much and wanted to share it. I actually started a blog called The Audio Files.
Hmm.
And it deals with that. It deals with how to write, direct, and edit an audio series.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for sure. Then people can click over and check that out. So, well, Kurt, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with this project, and hopefully we'll have you on again for a third time when you get another project finished.
Here's hoping. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, If your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing David Healing, and it's a real success story. He wrote and directed a low-budget, faith-based feature film called His Only Son. Next week, he comes on the show to talk us through this project, how he wrote it, how he raised the money for it, and how he got it produced. I've talked about faith-based niche before on the podcast. It's not a niche that I follow or know much about, but I do know that it's very underserved in terms of screenwriters. So as a writer, it's definitely something that if it's something that's interesting to you, it's definitely something you should learn more about, understand, and potentially maybe even write in this niche. Again, it just goes back to that sort of idea where so many people, and I include myself in this, we're not particularly spiritual or religious. And I think that is even sort of an offshoot of why we become screenwriters and are interested in something like this. So as I said, I don't have really a background. These are not films that I watch, but because there's not as many screenwriters competing, writing these types of scripts, therefore competing for these production slots, there's quite a bit of opportunity there. Again, and I've had, faith-based screenwriters on before, and the one thing that I'm always very impressed by is just how serious they take their spirituality and their faith. So this is not in any way me telling people to get into this niche just because there's dollar signs or just because it might be easier to sell a script. But what I am saying is that I think it could be a great niche for people that are already into religion and faith and are very spiritual people. This might be a good fit for you because, as I said, there's a lot more opportunity compared to other genres, other niches, and the number of screenwriters that are writing in this. And these films often do very, very well, as this one, His Only Son, is really doing very, very well, especially for a low-budget film. It's going to do some good numbers. So again, there's going to be producers looking to do these movies. If you're into, faith-based films, this is definitely a podcast episode you're not going to want to miss. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thank you for listening.